I would like to introduce our president, Karen Marie Yost, for her reflections for the evening.
Thank you, Jen. So as the description for this session says, the language that we use to describe ourselves, our guild, can be pretty complicated and messy. Historically, we've debated who is or should be included, whether and when to use modifiers that identify specific traditions, and what our primary purposes are or should be. And this is a conversation that continues amidst fraught political and social debates about who gets to speak and who decides which claims are valued. So as REA moves into another period of exploration and change, I want to use my presidential reflection period this evening or today to talk about how we might creatively respond once again to the central question, who do we say we are? Now, nearly 3 decades ago, when I was serving as a Christian religious educator in a United Church of Christ congregation, I regularly taught a text from the Bible in which Jesus asked his disciples 2 questions. Who do people say that I am? But who do you say I am? The disciples' responses to the first question, as they're recounted in Scripture, varied, representing the different perspectives of the people that were around them. But when it came to the disciples' own response, the Christian text depicts them as being of one mind. This unanimity has always struck me as rather unrealistic, particularly given other stories about the disciples in the Christian scriptures. It seems a case to me of a biblical author making a point about what the disciples should believe rather than a full-bodied description of a complex entity by a diverse set of people. Perhaps this is why I have been so intrigued by the idea of an REA annual meeting with an open call rather than a tightly defined theme around which most papers and presentations coalesce. In the 3 decades that I have been involved in REA, we have not previously held this kind of an open meeting where any and all members had an opportunity to share their work without fitting it into a predetermined theme or having it somewhat marginalized from the primary focus of the meeting if it didn't fit that theme. As we made the decision to go in this direction, the board and I wondered if making space for such a meeting might help us to see the breadth and diversity of interests that make up our guild. And I'm also wondering if looking at the variety of themes and perspectives offered in this meeting sessions helps us to actually answer the question, who do we say we are? But first, who do others say that we are? Let me begin with the AI overview that Google provides when asked, what is the Religious Education Association? I'll quote Google. The Religious Education Association, REA, is a major group of scholars, teachers, and religious leaders. Founded in 1903, it helps people study and teach religion in schools, colleges, and churches. Members share new ideas and research to make teaching better for everyone, end quote. Now, Google pulls its information from 3 sites, Wikipedia, which our networking coordinator helps to keep our entry in Wikipedia somewhat up to date, encyclopedia.com, and REA's own website. The AI goes on to identify membership in REA, which is professors, students, clergy, and teachers from many different faith traditions. REA's activities, they host meetings to talk about religion and learning, and what REA produces. They publish a well-known magazine called Religious Education. The University of Connecticut Center for Career Readiness and Life Skills, surprisingly, except maybe for the fact that Lucinda lived in Connecticut for a while, but surprisingly to me at least, includes REA among its list of professional organizations that students may want to engage. Here's what they have to say about us. Quote, the Religious Education Association is an incorporation of the more than 100-year-old association, REA, of persons who have gathered biennially, published, and taught religious education during this past century, and the Association of Professors and Researchers in Religious Education, APRRE, the group of professors, scholars, and researchers who for more than 30 years have gathered annually as a guild of scholars building and sharing a body of theory and research. Not especially illuminating, but it does say something about our history and that federation or merger. Both of these definitions by others focus on the kinds of members who make up the association and the fact that we gather and publish. They reduce us to a few sentences without incorporating much context, history, or mission and purpose language. Both also point primarily to the information about us that we provide on the Religious Education Association website, essentially leaving us to define ourselves to others. Not necessarily a bad thing, but an interesting thing to note. One way that we do this kind of defining ourselves to others is through our formal statements about REA. We say that our mission, quote, is to create opportunities for exploring and advancing the interconnected practices of scholarship, research, teaching, and leadership in faith communities, academic institutions, and the wider world community, end quote. We also claim that we will achieve this mission through international networks that define and strengthen the field and its leaders, and through substantial research, probing scholarship, and practical approaches to our field, as well as ecumenical, interreligious and cross-cultural, interdisciplinary, and interprofessional dialogue that stimulates members to recall and examine historic traditions and explore fresh visions of religious education for the diverse and ever-changing human family in our complex world community. That's our material from our mission statement, which we have on our website. But that's not the only way that we have tried to define ourselves for others. Another way we have done so is through a 2020 video featuring several members of the Guild who introduce themselves in terms of their professional locations and name some of their favorite personal activities and roles. Each of the participants in this video identify how long they have been part of REA. They talk about why they value the journal, and they share how REA has influenced and shaped them as religious education scholars. They conclude their segments in the video by explaining why they think others might benefit from participating and how a more diverse membership would make the Guild even more valuable. What REA 2026, this annual meeting, has done is invite members to define the Guild in terms of the work that we do and share. This means understanding REA as a conversation about how religious education is conceptualized and embodied in diverse contexts and settings. It means recognizing that REA still has a strong bent towards Christian religious education. If one looks at the papers that are being presented, the vast majority focus in that area, and that's consistent with our historic roots. And that we tend to also have a strong bent towards academic papers, because most of our presentations are part of the RIG breakout sessions. But by my not altogether scientific count, we have moved away from predominantly North American scholarship to a roughly even distribution of research by academics who reside in North America and those who reside elsewhere. And Jen actually provides us with some numbers about the difference between US-based scholars and those outside the US. If we were to analyze theorists and citations for the materials shared prior to this meeting, we would note that a much wider range of thinkers are framing our scholarship than in most of REA's history. In fact, I would say that we no longer, as an organization, have a dominant canon of religious educators whom scholars are expected to cite if they want to be admitted to our conference table and taken seriously. Now, that's not to say that some members may not point to long trusted scholarly companions in their presentations or during paper discussions, but the days when James Fowler and John Westerhoff and Thomas Groom and Maria Harris and Maria Montessori and Gabriel Moran and David Ng and Grant Shockley and Charles Foster and other predominantly Christian religious educators were expected staples of scholarly articles and discussions, I would claim seem to have passed. In the first plenary of this annual meeting, Jung-Chul Lee offered us some insight into how our journal does and does not reflect our actual and desired diversity. His work analyzed articles for the past 11 years in terms of regional and religious foci, institutional settings, use of empirical methods, and a selection of themes. He suggests, both in his plenary remarks and in the short essay he wrote for the journal in preparation for this meeting, that REA still has work to do if we are to live into our commitments of international, interreligious, and intercultural diversity. Part of the conversation that developed in the first plenary focused on just how difficult it is to create categories such as public schools, that can span diverse contexts. So a piece of the question about who do we say we are might also be, what might a truly global REA identity look like? Proposals Committee Chair Heather Ingersoll, in her pre-conference article, reflects on shared themes that she saw in the papers, works in progress, demonstrations, and collaborations that were proposed this year. She notes 4 themes that characterize our understanding of religious education across those proposals. 1, religious education values embodied experience as a significant mode of learning. 2, religious education appreciates the sacred character of everyday life. 3, religious education engages intentionally with digital culture and artificial intelligence tools. And 4, religious education promotes radical upending of our assumptions about what should be authoritative, where we find knowledge, and ethical uses of power. Heather suggests that our work, when shared, provides what we need to be what we desire. An organization that, quote, can equip both educators and learners with tools to navigate an uncertain future, end quote. In their pre-conference article, and likely in the session that they will do tomorrow, members of the Religious Education and Public Life and Global Community Committee highlight the variety of geographic and professional contexts in which religious education occurs. They wonder whether and how Religious Education Association can continue to pose critical questions in the midst of geopolitical polarization and the rampant digital propagation of misinformation. They reflect on how their own experiences of interfaith discourse while working together as committee members and writing their article suggest that trust and friendship are essential aspects of interreligious education. And in the second plenary that occurred just an hour or so ago, participants highlighted REA's prophetic voice, our commitment to creativity, our ability to facilitate connections, and the many ways we might speak and teach about a host of contemporary issues challenging individuals and communities here and around the globe. Yet, as a couple of participants eloquently explained, we and our field still need to prove our worth, as we are often not welcome or even invited to be part of these conversations by those who organize conferences about, say, neurodiversity or climate change, or by those who educate religious leaders in Christian denominational seminaries. Each of these approaches to articulating REA's identity offers some insight into who we are or might become. And each of these approaches is partial, offering us a glimpse in a mirror from the perspective of whoever is standing before that mirror. To build a fuller perspective of who we are, we need more bodies, more voices, more mirrors, and more glimpses. So for the rest of our time together, I would like to invite all of us who are gathered to pause and reflect on who you would say that we are. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to jot a few notes to yourself on either a physical or a virtual tablet, or to draw an image with shapes or pictures or words that you would use to represent REA's identity. Or perhaps you might want to reflect on a metaphor that you would associate with REA. Whatever helps you to think about your response, take a few minutes to do so. And then, after those few minutes have ended, I will invite all who are willing to share your response to the question, who do we say we are? All right, I'm going to gather us back into conversation with one another. And invite you, as you're willing, to share what you have contemplated in those few minutes, either aloud or in the chat if preferred. I also want to note that even though this is being recorded, if you are uncomfortable with sharing what you have in mind, drop a note to Jennifer in the chat that you would like the recording paused when you speak, and we will do that so that it's not included in the recording if you're more comfortable with that. And so I will ask, is there anyone who's willing to share their response? Who do we say we are?
So two parts of me made notes about this question. Start with the darker of the two. My cynical self says that we are an organization that provides young religious education scholars the opportunity to present and publish for the sake of their tenure portfolios. My higher self says that we are a place in which questions can be asked about forming and transforming people toward truth, beauty, and goodness.
Thank you for both of those responses. In the chat, REA is a truly international collaboration of religious educators providing respect and friendship, research information, and resources, both theoretical and practical, for doing RE in local situations, tertiary institutions, schools, and local faith communities.
I probably should add to that. and for critiquing what is done in the name of religion in the public sphere.
Thank you. Also in the chat, REA is similar with the Central Station, which is where Dr. Moon's son is. It's located in the center of Korea and is famous of the taste of bread. For me, the REA is similar with the station where many scholars, let's see, sorry, it's flagged, with new hope to reorganize and design our future like Jesus Christ, to meet disciples and beloved people in the way.
Hi, everyone. I don't have much to say at this point. I would point out that I would say every 2 years, certainly, probably more often than that, the board of directors itself asks that question and comes up with answers. And many of the things that you read about or read earlier come out of probably board meetings, which then were screened with the membership at particular times. So my own approach to this matter would be to start with the very narrowest definition of religious education, and then kind of amplify if people want to keep adding on additional tasks, if you will. And the core of the Religious Education Association is it's an association of people involved in religious education, whatever that may mean, who may be teaching any level from preschool through retirement, or do research in it, or are subjects of it, that is, receivers of religious education, would be just as welcome, it seems to me, within the Religious Education Association as people who do it. That's the core. And then the whole matter of, well, how is it structured and what is its mission, can go on endlessly, which I'm always happy to hear about. But as I say, it's my preference to start with the core and then work out rather than come up with 100 different things about, and then try to figure out, well, what ties it all together. Thanks.
Thank you, Noel. We are companions of the people on our shared journey of faith, from the chat. If we've said what we want to say about that piece, then let me flip the question a little bit. Are there any things that we are not? Things you would want to say that we are absolutely, definitely not this as REA?
Well, I'll come back to it. Sorry about that. We are not a global organization. Total membership is only, what, 200 or 300 people. And English is almost the entire conversational language. Whereas your neighbor in Canada at least has French and English as official languages, and all of its technically all of its academic professional organizations and others allow both French and English to be used, and some take great pains at doing it and some don't. But that's what I mean by starting with the core. But that's seems to me we're nowhere near being a global organization, and thank heavens for the internet where we can actually come together in this way and air thoughts.
Thank you, Noel. We have a note in the chat too. In my opinion, we are not interested in indoctrination. We are committed to education and critical thinking. We got a couple of thumbs up on that one. Some applause going too. I would note we're not a organization that requires people to meet a test of doctrine or belief structures. Barbara.
Yeah, I was just going to say we're not a single discipline. We've been using multidisciplinary more and more over the last couple of days, and I think that is an important piece of who we are. So we're not a single discipline.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm trying to get rid let me lower the hand first. Okay, so I honestly, I would just kind of balls all three of these up in one, which I tend to do. And I'm also deeply self-aware that anytime we invite ourselves to define an organization, we tend to also place our own personality on the front end of that conversation. So for those who know me, just, be patient. I think, I mean, starting with not, I mean, the thing I thought about is we're not a particular confessional association, I guess is one way I would say about that. I mean, many of us have or are part of traditions that have within themselves a confession, and the famous phrase again, but we have a journal that you mentioned in a previous session. I think through the ecumenical, interfaith, cross-cultural, interdisciplinary, interprofessional, and I'm like, those are both true and aspirational at one and the same time. I think for many of us, at times we tend to bump into those elements. Maybe the thing that probably I wrestle with is the posture of the association. And maybe the word I'm really trying to find the right word for this. So, thinking about Mary Elizabeth Moore's work on continuity and change, the language of we tend to be a progressive organization, tend to lean more toward change than the preservation of continuity, I guess would be one way to say that. And it seems to show up in our mission statement even in the way in which we recall, but we examine historic traditions. It's sort of this kind of posture. So I'll leave us with a different word. In some ways, I just think it may be why we wrestle with who are we so often is I think we're a kind of restless association. There is this kind of posture, if you will, toward something new, something else that maybe is a part of the educational task that we're all drawn into. But it strikes me over the years that whether it was it called to dialogue or to advocacy or to creativity, we don't seem to settle down as an association from that standpoint. Even when I've heard it even in our conversations here this time when we keep going, but we need to preserve some sense of tradition around religious education. And we go, yes, but what is that? So that restlessness just seems to kind of haunt who we are, for lack of a way of thinking about a posture. So, and that's all I got to say about that. So,
Thanks, Dean. I think there's a couple of things in the chat that might intersect with what you were saying. We are a place of intersecting, supporting, and stretching. And I think we don't want to define ourselves because we don't want to define anyone out of our community. Reflecting on who we REA are to each other, I think of crochet, knots and strands that also use and need open space. No?
It occurs to me, thanks. Um, One thing we are is part of two much larger and more diverse groups in human culture, namely education and religion. And some of the things noted by others so far would be true of education generally. Educators are never satisfied as a group. Every education organization they belong to, whether they're religious or other subject areas, uh, are constantly reinventing. And indeed, the whole realm of education undergoes changes typically, whether it's public or private, every 10 or 20 years in terms of terminology, in terms of organization, and so on. So, and then the area of religion is the other large context that we're part of. And one need not spend any time at all in terms of pointing out diversity rather than unity in terms of the.
Thanks, Noel. Any last comments that those who haven't had a chance to speak would like to make at this time? Yes, Lily.
This is Lily. Yeah, I've been quiet because I'm a fairly new member. I just joined this week, as a matter of fact. And I've been kind of figuring out, do I fit in? Where do I fit in to this group, what I've heard? And I have to say, after listening to Karen Marie, your the Wikipedia read and, what's out there and the self-reflections that I've heard in here, I feel like this is totally the place. And I'm just so, I guess, pleasantly surprised that I feel like, wow, okay, I fit in to this group. As a religious educator, I mostly work with children. It's the higher education piece that I'm kind of thinking it's about. And I don't want to get a dissertation or doctor, but I'm in there on my, with my hands every week with the children. How do we keep them spiritually alive in this, in the ways that we can? So I just want to throw that out there, that it's been such a pleasure to learn who we are for the outside world and some of the reflections inside here. I want to support the work.
Thank you, Lily. And if you're particularly working with children, you and I must talk some more, because that's a passionate area of research for me. We also have in the chat, we are not philosophers of religion, while we have some among us. We are a slowly deepening liberal guild that seeks to produce religious and spiritual leaders who can research, publish, teach, challenge, and nurture persons of faith. While fluctuating in our ability to organize, we try to foster ecumenism, internationality, difference, questioning, and just ways of working together. We still seek to be rooted in some identity in with the divine. Elizabeth?
Karen Marie, I remember when we, as an organisation, as a religious education association, and the APRE, Association of Professors and Researchers in Religious Education, joined together, when we came back together as the one entity, and that important element of practitioners as well as researchers. It was just not an academic guild, but rather the inclusiveness of our understanding of who we are as religious educators in whatever level, in whatever way in which we conceive ourselves. So it's great to have the Lilies and the Cheryls and all of the people who feel that they are marginal to be able to say to them, no, you belong, friends. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Elizabeth. We've come to the end of the time allotted for these presidential reflections. Whether you chose to share aloud or in the chat what you have reflected on, or you just hold that in your own thoughts and hands and writing, I hope that you'll continue to ponder this question: who do we say we are? Who do we say we are not? What do we aspire to be? Because these are the questions that keep us enlivened and lively. I firmly believe that if we as people and as organizations or guilds are not asking the question of identity, then we may tend to coast on our assumptions without being aware of how we're changing and growing and slipping back and struggling with the things around us. So as we continue to move through this annual meeting, keep that question and your initial thoughts about that question close at hand. Who do we say we are? Well, we're saying it in every session in some way or another. Thank you all.